We live in an age that worships speed. Fast food, fast fame, fast money. Everything is designed to arrive instantly. And yet, beneath the hum of constant motion, so many people feel emptier than ever. We scroll through feeds filled with success stories and transformation videos, each edited to compress years into seconds, leaving us wondering why our progress feels so slow, so ordinary. The world has sold us the illusion that speed equals success, that faster means better, and that stillness is failure. But deep down we sense something's missing. The rush doesn't satisfy. It only amplifies the void. If you look closely at every so-called overnight success, you'll see a different story hiding beneath the surface. One of quiet effort repeated without applause, of discipline carried out in silence. The entrepreneur who stayed up learning while others slept, the athlete training before dawn when no one was watching, the artist sketching the 1,000th imperfect line. Their rhythm was steady, not loud. They were guided not by excitement, but by something rarer, devotion. And it's this devotion, this disciplined persistence that turns ordinary people into masters of their craft. We all feel the tension between two versions of ourselves. There's the self that dreams, the part of you that imagines freedom, fulfillment, abundance. And then there's the self that delays, the part that hesitates, that whispers, maybe tomorrow. Every morning, that silent war begins anew. The alarm rings, the choice appears, comfort or commitment. The bed is warm, the day is long, the goal feels far. And in that moment, our future quietly shifts toward one side or the other. Why do we chase comfort while envying those who have endured discomfort long enough to build something lasting? It's because comfort promises safety, while discipline offers transformation, and transformation by its nature demands loss. We must lose ease, lose excuses, lose the illusion of control. Discipline asks for sacrifice, but not the kind that drains you, rather the kind that reshapes you. We must all suffer one of two things, said Jim Rohn, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Most people spend their lives running from one kind of pain, only to be consumed by the other. Think about this. The richest rewards in life, health, wealth, mastery, love, that all share the same foundation. They are born from effort sustained quietly over time. The investor who compounds small, consistent savings ends up wealthier than the one chasing hot trends. The writer who commits to one page a day eventually fills entire shelves. The parent who chooses presence over distraction raises children who know stability. None of these victories happen in public. They grow underground, like roots strengthening before the tree breaks through the soil. But our culture doesn't teach us to value the invisible. We glorify outcomes, not process. We post achievements, not repetitions. As a result, we forget that everything great was once small and unimpressive. The first workout, the first saved dollar, the first line written. These are the humble beginnings of wealth, not in money alone, but in character. And character, as the philosopher Epictetus once said, is built by acting rightly, not by talking about what is right. Discipline, then, is not punishment. It's the quiet proof that you believe in your own future. Every time you choose to persist rather than postpone, you're saying to yourself, I am worth the effort. It's a declaration of faith, not in luck or timing, but in your capacity to become. When you train your mind to do what is necessary, even when it's inconvenient, you are not restricting your freedom. You are reclaiming it, because freedom, in its truest form, is not the absence of effort. It's the ability to choose effort for what matters most. Imagine two people walking side by side toward a mountain. One is burdened by the need for shortcuts, always looking for the easiest path. The other moves steadily, one step at a time, embracing the climb. At first, their pace looks the same. But as the terrain grows harder, one falters while the other grows stronger. The difference isn't talent nor luck, it's rhythm. The one who learned to keep moving, even without applause, becomes unstoppable. And perhaps that's the secret rhythm of success that the world no longer hears, the quiet beat of consistency. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or hashtags. It hums beneath the noise of daily life, soft yet unrelenting. Over time, that rhythm carves through resistance like water through stone. Every repetition, every refusal to quit, deepens its groove. And one day, what once felt like effort becomes identity. You no longer try to be disciplined, you simply are. Of course, this truth isn't easy to accept. We are conditioned to crave speed, to seek comfort, to measure progress in likes and metrics. Yet the deeper reward of discipline cannot be seen instantly. It grows slowly, invisibly, and then all at once. Like compound interest, it begins small and feels futile. But give it time, and it transforms not just your results, but your very sense of self. That's why discipline, though silent, is the most powerful form of wealth creation. It builds the internal infrastructure on which every external success depends. So when you find yourself frustrated by the slowness of your journey, when the results feel distant, when effort feels unseen, remember this: every act of discipline is a deposit into your future. It's a kind of unseen savings account, one that grows with patience and integrity. One day those small deposits will yield something extraordinary, not just financial gain, but peace of mind, confidence, and trust in yourself. The world may never notice the mornings you showed up tired, the evenings you kept going when no one clapped, but life notices. The universe, in its quiet arithmetic, always balances effort and reward, just not on your preferred schedule. Discipline may feel like a lonely path, but it's the only one that guarantees growth. And that's where we begin this journey, at the crossroads between ease and effort, between speed and stillness. You already know which road leads to meaning. The question is whether you'll choose it, not once but every day. Because the truth is simple, though often ignored. Success doesn't arrive in waves of excitement. It grows in silence, watered by consistency. As Napoleon Hill once said, patience, persistence, and perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success. And when those three unite within you, something miraculous happens. Wealth stops being a chase and becomes a state of being. That is the silent power behind every fortune. Society teaches us to celebrate talent, to worship opportunity, and to chase the illusion of luck as if fortune were a gust of wind that picks a favored few. We hand out applause to the visible peaks, the launch parties, the viral moments, the sudden headlines, and call those peaks proof of worth. But if you ask anyone who has built something that lasts, they will tell you a quieter story, that the visible moment is only the tip of an iceberg whose mass was formed in silence. The lesson most of us never learned in school or at dinner parties is that the architecture of enduring success is not talent nor chance, but discipline, the slow, steady ordering of days into a life that compounds. As James Clear reminds us, you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. That line is not a dismissal of ambition. It is an invitation to repair the plumbing beneath our house of dreams. Motivation is a beautiful thing when it visits, but it is fickle. It arrives like a guest with charm and leaves just as quickly, taking with it the enthusiasm that propelled our beginnings. Most people wait for that guest. They look for the mood, the inspiration, the sudden surge of energy, and then wonder why their projects stall, why their savings plans suffer, why their bodies do not change. The truth is simple and unglamorous. Motivation will not build your practice, your portfolio, or your character every morning. Discipline will. Habit bridges the gap between wanting and having. It is the daily insistence that your future matters more than your present convenience. There is a dignity to showing up when the feeling is gone, and that dignity becomes the quiet engine of transformation. Picture the craftsman in a small workshop, the kind of person who knows every scratch and groove on his tools because he has used them so long. He does not work for applause. He works because the work itself is his way to order the world. Long after the city lights blink out, he continues, shaping, sanding, repeating the same careful motions until the piece takes the exact form he imagined. His reward is not the one-time celebration, but the mastery that accumulates in his hands and in his mind. This is not romantic myth-making, it is observable truth. Mastery is not a sudden strike of genius. It is the result of the humble repetition that most people dismiss as boring. In that dismissal lies the difference between those who last and those who only flash. The world applauds the outcome but rarely honors the hours that carved the outcome into being. We livestream the victory and forget the months of rehearsal that made victory possible. Social media packages success into short, consumable stories, and we begin to mistake the packaging for the product. That cultural shorthand teaches a dangerous emotional lesson, that only the visible is valuable. The quiet rituals of restraint, saving a small portion of income, refusing a night out to finish an important chapter, waking up to train in bitter weather, do not make for good headlines. Yet these are the deeds that, compounded over years, produce not just accomplishments but character. When we redirect our admiration from the flashy to the faithful, we change the kinds of lives we build. Emotion is a poor accountant. It measures the immediate and ignores the deferred. We confuse excitement for progress and find ourselves chasing stimulation instead of lasting change. Newness feels like improvement, and novelty masquerades as growth. The emotional trap is to equate movement with direction. We move a lot, but often away from what matters. Discipline, by contrast, is a moral reorientation of attention. It teaches the heart to value the long rhythm over the short thrill, to prefer the steady accrual of small virtues to the dramatic but fleeting highs that leave us empty. This is why the patient investor, who contributes monthly into a diversified plan, will almost always fare better than the gambler who chases the hottest tip. Not because markets are moral, but because consistency outperforms impulse. We live in a culture addicted to speed. Fast lanes promise faster results, instant recognition, and the seductive dopamine of immediate feedback. But speed is a brittle currency. It buys urgency at the expense of depth. Discipline asks for something our era rarely gifts: patience. It asks us to sit with the slow work of becoming and to find meaning in repetition. Few attain it, not because it is rare, but because it is quietly demanding. It requires the subtraction of many small pleasures for the addition of one durable life. That subtraction is not loss but investment. Each refusal to surrender to distraction, each deliberate choice to delay gratification, is a deposit in an account that compounds with time. The patient person discovers that the slow accumulation of effort yields a kind of inevitability, a life that moves toward its purpose by the simple arithmetic of small, right actions taken again and again. And here is the paradox that will become a theme for the rest of our journey. What feels slow today becomes unstoppable tomorrow. The humble, invisible act, repeated faithfully, patterns the soul into someone who cannot easily be shaken by sudden shifts in fortune or mood. The person who trains themselves to resist the small temptations is the person who will not be ruined by larger storms. There is a dignity to this inevitability. It is a power that does not announce itself because it does not need to. Discipline, in that sense, is less an external tactic and more an internal architecture. It is the consistent shaping of your days so they, in time, shape you. If you find this notion uncomfortable, you are in good company. We prefer quick fixes. They flatter us with the illusion of control. Yet the most secure forms of abundance are earned in the quiet places where no one is watching. So let this be your first reflective question. What small, faithful act could you commit to today that, if repeated, would quietly change the shape of your life? Think of it as planting a tree that will one day shade not just you, but those who follow. The rest of this work will show you how to plant, water, and protect that root system so that your wealth, in time, in freedom, in character, grows deep and enduring. Discipline is often misunderstood as a stern external force, something imposed from without, a set of rigid rules that beat the life out of spontaneity. But the truest form of discipline is gentler and more profound. It is alignment, the quiet practice of arranging your days so they reflect what you truly value rather than what you temporarily feel. When you think of discipline this way, it stops being a punishment and becomes a declaration. I will live according to my principles, not my passing moods. This shift matters because moods are weather. Values are terrain. Weather changes. Terrain endures. There is a peculiar power in learning to act even when you don't feel like it. In those small, unremarkable moments, you reclaim sovereignty over impulse and emotion. And that sovereignty compounds. Consider the life of someone who, despite tiredness or doubt, chooses the same small act again and again. They decide to save a portion of each paycheck, to close their laptop and spend a meaningful hour with their child, to write a single page each morning. Those choices feel insignificant in isolation, but over months and years, they begin to pattern your days, your identity, and therefore your destiny. When you act in alignment with your values despite fluctuating feelings, you stop being carried by your urges and start steering your life. There is an unobtrusive architecture to this work. A person who saves $1 this month resists a temptation this evening, or writes a single paragraph today is doing more than accumulating small wins. They are building inevitability. James Clear says, "Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement." And that phrase captures the quiet mathematics at play. Repeated small actions layer upon one another until change becomes mathematically likely rather than merely possible. The investor who consistently contributes to a simple plan will outpace the speculator who chases headlines. The writer who writes a page a day will eventually have a book, while the one who waits for inspiration will wait forever. This inevitability is not magic. It is the arithmetic of patience. Transformation seldom arrives with fanfare. It begins in the shadowed spaces, in the mornings before dawn, in the evenings when others have given up, in the ordinary hours when the world offers no applause. One consistent act begets another. The saved dollar encourages another. The written page builds confidence for the next one. The morning workout makes the evening choices easier. Over time, these acts restructure your inner narrative. Self-respect grows where self-doubt once lived. This is not a single heroic moment, but a slow unspooling of a different life story, where your identity shifts from someone who hopes to someone who becomes. The person who trains their mind in restraint does not end up impoverished. They discover abundance in forms that once felt foreign. Restraint clarifies priorities and reveals resources where before you only saw scarcity. You begin to notice abundance in time reclaimed, in relationships deepened by presence, in the clarity that comes from fewer distractions. Mastery reframes your relationship with excess. You no longer equate having more with being more. Instead, abundance becomes an inner measurement, the sense that your life is rich because it aligns with your values. What once felt like sacrifice often transmutes into a kind of peace. The early friction, the discomfort of saying no, gradually softens as rhythm replaces resistance. Where you once wrenched yourself through discipline, you learn to move with it. Habits no longer feel foreign but comfortable, like a garment formed to your shape. This rhythm is not mindless autopilot. It is the cultivated cadence of a person whose internal environment is ordered and intentional. In that calm, decisions feel clearer, priorities sharper, and the noise of impulse grows distant. When routine becomes rhythm, the pulse of a disciplined life reveals itself. Steady, calm, unshakable. There is a peculiar freedom in being bound to something higher, not a bondage that restricts, but a framework that liberates. By committing to aligned action over time, you create a life that resists the frantic fluctuations of fashion and feeling. The world will still celebrate short bursts of brilliance and overnight stories, but your life will be built on a sturdier ledger, the ledger of repeated, right choices. This is the architecture of long-term wealth, not merely in your bank account, but in your energy, your relationships, and the trust you have in yourself. So ask yourself a simple question: what small, value-aligned act can you repeat today that, if done consistently, would begin to change the shape of your life? Choose something modest enough to complete even on your worst day. Then honor that commitment until it becomes part of who you are. In doing so, you will discover that discipline is not a series of prohibitions, but the pathway to a life lived with integrity and quiet abundance. The rest of this journey will show you how to install that practice into the architecture of your days, so that what once demanded effort becomes, in time, your most faithful companion. The first test of discipline is almost always invisible. It happens in the quiet hours when no one is watching, when no one applauds, and when the results refuse to show themselves. That's the crucible where real character is forged, not in moments of glory, but in the long stretches of silence where effort feels unseen. Every great transformation, whether in wealth, mastery, or character, begins here in obscurity. The irony is that most people abandon their goals not because they're incapable, but because they can't tolerate being unseen while they're growing. They mistake the lack of visible results for failure, never realizing that the invisible phase is the most vital one of all. Discipline, at its core, is an act of faith. It's the willingness to continue sowing seeds long before you see a single sprout. Think of the farmer who tills the soil and waters the ground day after day, trusting that nature will do its part in time. He doesn't dig up the seeds every morning to check if they've begun to grow. He knows that patience is part of the process. Likewise, in the early stages of any pursuit, saving money, building a skill, nurturing a dream, results are rarely immediate. You may practice for weeks before noticing improvement, Save for months before your account balance feels meaningful, or work on a project for years before anyone takes notice. But beneath that apparent stillness, something essential is taking shape. Momentum, identity, and resilience. These unglamorous repetitions are what separate the dreamers from the doers. In a world addicted to instant gratification, consistency becomes a quiet rebellion. Most people crave the feeling of progress more than progress itself. They start projects because beginnings feel exciting, then abandon them when excitement fades. But those who learn to stay, to keep showing up long after novelty disappears, they build something far rarer: endurance. True discipline isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle, deliberate, and deeply human. It's the silent nod to yourself when no one is watching, the quiet whisper that says, "I'll keep going." The logical mind often rebels during this stage. It insists on evidence, on visible returns for effort. It's not working fast enough, it complains, demanding measurable proof that all this time and sacrifice are worth it. The emotional mind joins in, adding its own chorus of resistance. This is too hard, too uncertain, too slow. But the disciplined mind, was that quiet, reasoned part of you that has made peace with patience, simply replies, "Keep going." It doesn't silence the doubt. It walks with it. It doesn't wait for the perfect mood. It acts in spite of it. This is what separates those who build lasting success from those who chase fleeting motivation. Doubt is not the enemy of discipline. It's its companion. Every person who has ever achieved something remarkable, whether in business, art, health, or personal growth, has walked alongside doubt. They've wrestled with fatigue, second-guessed their efforts, and wondered if the silence would ever end. But what they understood, consciously or not, is that progress doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly, like compound interest. The returns are invisible at first, and then one day, almost inexplicably, everything begins to make sense. The results you sought start to appear, not as sudden miracles, but as inevitable consequences of persistence. There's a striking truth that few are willing to confront. Comfort costs more than effort. Every time we choose ease over progress, we make a silent trade, our future potential for present relief. It's a costly exchange, though it feels pleasant in the moment. Comfort tells you that rest is deserved when effort is still required. It whispers, "You've done enough," when in truth the work has only just begun. The disciplined person sees comfort for what it is, a clever thief that steals growth in the name of self-care. That doesn't mean you should never rest. My true rest is vital. But it means you must distinguish between recovery and escape. Recovery restores you. Escape erodes you. Each time you delay an impulse, each moment you say no to distraction, you're quietly building wealth. Not just financial wealth, but the wealth of control, clarity, and confidence. When you choose to save rather than spend, study rather than scroll, build rather than boast, you're engaging in acts of unseen creation. The world won't reward you immediately for these decisions, but they begin to accumulate in the background, shaping your future with mathematical certainty. As the writer Morgan Housel once noted, "Wealth is what you don't see. It's the invisible accumulation of good decisions, small sacrifices, and quiet patience, the kind of discipline that compounds over years into a life of stability and freedom." Still, the hardest question remains, can you love the process when the reward feels far away? It's one thing to endure discomfort for a while, but it's another to embrace it, to find joy in the repetition itself. That's where the true mastery of discipline begins. Because discipline is not just about doing hard things, it's about finding meaning in them. When you can love the process, even when no result is in sight, you free yourself from the tyranny of outcome. You stop asking, "When will this pay off?" and begin saying, "This act alone is my proof of progress." The runner who enjoys the run, not just the finish line, never stops running. The saver who enjoys the restraint, not just the accumulation, never goes broke. The learner who enjoys the process of growth, not just the certificate, never stops evolving. So the next time you feel unseen or unrewarded, remember this: the invisible seasons are sacred. They are where you're building the kind of strength that cannot be faked. Applause may come later, but by then it won't matter as much, because you'll have already learned to value something far greater than recognition: self-trust. You'll know deep down that your word to yourself holds weight. And that realization, that quiet confidence in your ability to follow through, is the birthplace of true wealth. In time, the results will come. The silence will give way to echoes, and those who once doubted your path will call you lucky or gifted. But you'll know the truth. Luck had little to do with it. It was forged in those invisible hours when you chose consistency over comfort, alignment over impulse, and patience over proof. The invisible test of discipline never really ends. It only evolves. Each new level of success asks the same question in a different form. Can you keep going? And if you can answer yes, even when the reward feels far away, you'll discover that the process itself was the reward all along. Many people recoil at the very mention of discipline. The word sounds austere, almost punitive, like something meant to confine or suppress our natural desires. We're taught to believe that freedom means doing whatever we want, whenever we want. Yet if you look closely at those who live without boundaries, you'll notice something tragic. They're not free at all. They're enslaved by impulse, by comfort, by the fleeting whims of emotion. True freedom, as paradoxical as it may sound, begins not in the absence of rules but in the mastery of self. Discipline is not a cage. It's a key. It doesn't take freedom away. It gives it back. The person without discipline drifts through life chasing the next release, the next rush, the next distraction that promises to soothe the discomfort of stagnation. They seek freedom through indulgence, buying what they can't afford, eating what they don't need, scrolling through endless noise to escape their own thoughts. But indulgence, while sweet in the moment, always sends a bill. And the debt it collects is steep. It asks for your peace, your focus, your self-respect. It trades long-term fulfillment for temporary relief. Like a credit card that hides its interest rate behind a glossy promise, indulgence seduces you first and punishes you later. You can see this truth everywhere. The undisciplined spender who chases comfort through purchases ends up shackled by debt. The entrepreneur who avoids structure loses direction. The dreamer who waits for motivation never begins. It's not that these people lack intelligence or ambition. It's that they've mistaken ease for freedom. What feels liberating at first becomes limiting in the end. Every undisciplined choice is an exchange, a moment of relief traded for a future of regret. And over time, that regret becomes heavy. It shows up not as an obvious pain, but as a quiet, persistent anxiety, the kind that lingers when you know you're capable of more, but can't seem to bridge the gap between intention and action. The emotional cost of undisciplined living is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself like failure or heartbreak. It seeps in quietly, disguised as restlessness, distraction, or fatigue. It's the subtle ache of knowing you've broken yet another promise to yourself, to wake early, to save more, to focus longer, to stay the course. Each unkept promise erodes trust in your own word, until one day you begin to doubt not just your goals, but your ability to follow through on anything at all. That's the real loss, not the missed opportunities, but the gradual dimming of self-belief. Because once you stop trusting yourself, even the smallest dreams start to feel unreachable. Discipline repairs that fracture. It restores faith in your own word, one small kept promise at a time. It may start with something as simple as finishing a workout, resisting a purchase, or sitting with discomfort instead of fleeing from it. Each act of restraint builds strength, not through denial but through choice. And in that choice lies power. The disciplined person doesn't live without pleasure. They simply don't need pleasure to feel alive. Their joy doesn't depend on external stimulation, but on the quiet pride of control. They discover that happiness isn't found in excess, but in alignment, in knowing that their actions serve their deeper values, not just their passing moods. It's a paradox that the world often misunderstands. The more structure you build around your life, the freer you become within it. Think of a river. Without its banks, it's just a flood, directionless, destructive, unable to flow anywhere meaningful. But when guided by boundaries, that same water becomes powerful, capable of shaping valleys and sustaining life. Discipline works the same way. It channels your energy, focuses your will, and allows your potential to move with purpose instead of chaos. The absence of boundaries feels like freedom, only until you realize you're drowning in your own lack of direction. There's a quiet dignity that comes with disciplined living, a calm that indulgence can never replicate. It's the serenity of knowing you are not at the mercy of your cravings or emotions. You begin to find joy not in having everything, but in needing less. The simple meal tastes richer when it follows effort. The restful night feels deeper when it's earned through consistency. The money saved carries a quiet satisfaction that no impulsive purchase could ever provide. Discipline doesn't strip life of pleasure, it refines it. It teaches you to experience more with less, to feel wealth not as accumulation, but as assurance. This understanding transforms how you see success. We often imagine success as a celebration, bright lights, applause, luxury. But in truth, success is far quieter. It's not a monument to excess, but a testament to endurance. The most successful people are not the ones who chased pleasure relentlessly, but those who learned to delay it, who understood that fulfillment delayed is fulfillment multiplied. Their wealth isn't merely in what they possess, but in the peace that comes from knowing they built it through effort, integrity, and time. They don't need to prove their worth through noise. Their life speaks through results. You can often recognize the disciplined individual without them saying a word. There's a steadiness in how they walk, how they speak, how they handle uncertainty. They don't react, they respond. They don't chase every opportunity. They select the right ones. Their restraint becomes their strength, and their patience becomes their advantage. While others burn out chasing every fleeting opportunity, the disciplined stay the course. They understand that the real game isn't about moving fast, it's about moving wisely. And yet the world celebrates the opposite. It rewards visibility, not consistency. It glorifies those who make noise, not those who move with quiet purpose. But history always favors the patient. Every empire, every great fortune, every lasting legacy was built not on frenzy but on focus. The irony of life, the one most people overlook, is that the very structure we resist is the source of the freedom we crave. When you master yourself, you no longer need the world to manage your peace. You stop being pulled by distraction and start being guided by intention. Discipline doesn't just make you productive, it makes you powerful. It gives you back the one thing money can't buy and indulgence can't sustain, peace of mind. The peace that comes from knowing that you are no longer ruled by impulse, no longer tossed by emotion, no longer dependent on chance. It's the kind of freedom that no one can take away, because it doesn't live in your circumstances. It lives in you. So, the next time discipline feels like restriction, remember this. The price of discipline is always paid in advance, but the reward lasts forever. The price of indulgence feels small at first, but the debt compounds until it consumes your future. Freedom, real freedom, isn't doing whatever you want. It's having the strength to choose what truly serves you. And once you understand that truth, once you feel it not as a rule but as a revelation, you'll never see discipline as limitation again. You'll see it for what it truly is, the quiet architecture of freedom itself. There comes a moment in any long struggle when the noise outside begins to fade and the conversation inside turns serious. Up until then, discipline can feel like an external chore. Another item on a to-do list, a series of resistances you endure because the outcome seems desirable. But at some point, often after enough mornings of showing up and enough evenings of choosing restraint, the real work points inward. Discipline stops being something you do to get something and becomes something you do to become someone. That pivot from doing to becoming is subtle, almost invisible at first, but it changes everything. Your decisions are no longer merely instrumental, they are declarative. Each act affirms a new identity, not because of what you will receive, but because of who you are becoming through repeated choice. When you reach that point, mastery begins to look less like control and more like surrender. The image many people hold of mastery is a tight fist, of dominating time, conquering tasks and bending outcomes to will. But the paradox is that true mastery asks for the opposite, the willingness to submit to rhythm, repetition, and process. Surrender here is not weakness. It is acceptance of a long game that cannot be hurried. You stop wrestling with every obstacle, as if force alone will move mountains, and instead lean into the reality that small, faithful motions repeated create terrain. This surrender feels humble because it recognizes limits, but it is powerful because it trusts the cumulative logic of consistent practice. This is when the struggle softens into something like peace. Once you stop fighting the work stops fighting you. The hours you once dreaded become chambers of transformation. The practice that once felt like punishment begins to offer a strange companionship. Rhythm becomes comfort. Repetition becomes a form of meditation. Think of a musician who once hated scales, but now finds solace in them, because they are the very structure that allows improvisation to feel free and confident. In the same way, your disciplined routines offer scaffolding for creative and expansive living. They do not imprison you. They free you to operate without constant friction. Each act of restraint then turns into an act of faith. When you say no to the immediate pull of pleasure, and yes to a practice that promises distant payoff, you are effectively placing a small deposit into the bank of your future self. There is humility in that act, because it requires you to believe in a person you're still becoming, to trust that the investments you make in patience, study, and sober choices will one day be reflected back in a steadier life. This faith is not mystical. It is pragmatic and patient. It is the quiet confidence that the disciplined person carries, a conviction that effort, compounded over time, yields realities that feel proportionally larger than the moments that produce them. Outer results, the visible gains of wealth, stability, and confidence are not the primary altar at which discipline bows, but they become honest mirrors of inner order. The tidy accounts, the healthier body, the calm demeanor in crisis. These external markers simply testify to a system that functioned. They are evidence, not the essence. When your internal life is ordered, when priorities align and impulses are governed by values, the exterior world cannot help but reflect that coherence. This is why those who practice inner discipline often appear unshakable in storms. Their outer environment has been quietly prepared to weather them. What looks like luck from the outside is usually the consequence of internal investments made in silence. As awareness grows, resistance tends to dissolve. Where once you fought against discomfort, you begin to notice it and then let it pass without hostility. The energy formerly spent on resisting becomes available for cultivating skill, deepening relationships, or stewarding resources. Urgency, that old tyrant that drives poor choices, loses its authority. You begin to make decisions with a different posture, less panic, more perspective. The peace that emerges is not passive resignation. It is active stewardship, a calm, deliberate tending of one's inner and outer life. In this atmosphere, discipline no longer feels like a burden, but like a practice of sacred care. And so the final change is almost spiritual in texture. Discipline ceases to be heavy and becomes, in its quiet way, sacred. Sacred not in the sense of dogma, but in the sense of reverent attention to the small acts that create a life. Once these acts are consecrated, morning routines, monthly savings, consistent learning, steady kindness, they confer meaning beyond their immediate utility. They become rituals of identity, rites through which you say each day, I am the kind of person who keeps his word to himself. This sacredness transforms mundane repetition into a continual offering, a way to honor future possibility through present fidelity. When you reach this state, the work is no longer punishment. It is devotion, and devotion is perhaps the purest kind of freedom. If you imagine this inward turn as a doorway, then the step through it is smaller than you think. One repeated choice, respected promise, and patient night at a time. The world will still present its loud temptations, and the inner critic will still find reasons to doubt. But each time you choose alignment over impulse, surrender over frantic control, you carve the next inch of the path. Over years, those inches add up to a road you can walk without stumbling, a life whose outer evidence is simply the echo of inner order. Pause here for a moment and ask, what small act of restraint might you treat today as an act of faith for the person you hope to be tomorrow? True wisdom doesn't shout. It doesn't demand to be noticed or celebrated. It often grows in silence, in those long, uneventful stretches of effort where no applause is offered and no milestones are visible. Those moments can feel lonely, even invisible, but they are the soil in which depth takes root. You learn through those seasons that the loudest victories are rarely the most meaningful ones. The external world loves noise, announcements, achievements, displays of success. But the internal world, where real transformation happens, thrives in quiet. Silence becomes a teacher. It reveals the strength of your intentions, the quality of your patience, and the truth of whether you're doing the work for validation or for something deeper. It's in that quiet that the mature soul begins to understand that success is not an event, but a state of balance. When the external world begins to reward you, when the money, recognition, and opportunities finally start to appear, a new challenge arises: staying grounded. Many people think discipline is only needed in the beginning, when progress is slow. But discipline is even more necessary once you start to rise, because growth can seduce you into believing you're invincible, and that's when ego takes the reins. You start chasing the applause that once meant nothing to you. You start measuring your worth by the size of your results, instead of the steadiness of your rhythm. The wise, however, stay close to silence. They understand that without internal balance, fortune becomes a burden, not a blessing. Imagine a tree standing in a vast open field. To the casual observer, its strength is seen in its height, in how its branches stretch confidently toward the sky. But what the eye can't see, what truly gives that tree its stability, are the roots growing deeper and wider beneath the ground. A storm may bend it, but it doesn't fall, because its unseen foundation is stronger than the winds that test it. That's how disciplined growth works. You might spend years unseen, putting down roots in the form of patience, restraint, and consistency. Then, when your season of success finally arrives, you won't be shaken by the sudden winds of praise or criticism. The height of your fortune will never exceed the depth of your foundation. That is the quiet genius of discipline. It grows you downward before it grows you upward. The paradox is clear once you begin to live this way. By letting go of control over outcomes, you gain mastery over yourself. Control, after all, is an illusion. We plan, we forecast, we push, but outcomes have their own timeline, their own rhythm. Discipline is not about forcing results. It's about aligning with principles that make results inevitable. You can't control how quickly the harvest comes, but you can control how faithfully you tend the soil. That shift, from demanding control to cultivating consistency, is the essence of wisdom. It frees you from anxiety, because your peace no longer depends on outcomes. You stop measuring your progress by what happens today, and start measuring it by how true you remain to your values. Think about the difference between wealth built on impulse and wealth built on patience. The first is fragile, a structure built on sand. It's born from excitement, greed, or fear, and it collapses the moment emotion shifts. The second is resilient, because it's anchored in time-tested behavior. It's the investor who continues saving, even when markets fall. The entrepreneur who refines a product long before it catches on. The individual who builds slowly and intentionally, instead of chasing every shortcut. Patience doesn't just protect wealth. It multiplies it, because it keeps you calm when others are panicking and humble when others are overreaching. The disciplined understand this law deeply. Time is not your enemy when you are consistent. It is your greatest ally. We live in an age that glorifies intensity, but undervalues consistency. Everyone wants the breakthrough moment, the viral success, the overnight fortune. Yet the truth is that those who master their rhythm, who understand how to show up quietly, persistently, with a sense of calm purpose, build something unbreakable. They aren't tossed around by moods or market trends. They know who they are, and that identity becomes an anchor. Peace, as Seneca once wrote, comes when you stop depending on things you cannot control. The disciplined person lives this truth daily. They've learned that peace is not found in the reward, but in the rhythm, the daily cadence of doing what must be done, even when it's uncelebrated. It's a beautiful irony, really. What begins as discipline often transforms into peace. At first, discipline feels heavy. It's the weight of waking early, saving when you want to spend, choosing silence when you'd rather speak. But over time, it becomes effortless, like the heartbeat of a well-trained mind. When your actions align with your values, the internal friction disappears. You no longer feel at war with yourself. You find joy not in finishing the work, but in doing it. The rhythm itself becomes its own reward. That's when life starts to feel lighter, when you no longer need constant outcomes to feel content. And from this calm, a quieter kind of power emerges. It's not the explosive, visible kind that shouts success from rooftops. It's the steady, unshaken confidence that moves through chaos without losing center. This power doesn't come from dominance. It comes from stability. You can sense it in the person who remains composed when others are anxious, who moves deliberately while others rush, who stays kind even when tested. That kind of power is rare because it isn't built for display. It's built for endurance. It's the power that allows you to remain grounded when markets crash, when circumstances change, when seasons shift. It's the strength of knowing that your peace cannot be taken, because it was never borrowed from external things to begin with. In the end, the real goal of discipline isn't control, achievement, or perfection. It's freedom. Freedom from chaos. Freedom from emotional volatility. Freedom from the endless cycle of wanting and regretting. Discipline simplifies life by aligning action with purpose. It turns the unpredictable into something navigable. It makes peace not a temporary state but a permanent home. So when the world tells you to move faster, to chase more, to keep proving your worth, pause. Listen for the silence that has been waiting beneath all the noise. That silence is where wisdom grows, where roots deepen, and where you rediscover your strength. Because the truth is simple, though few ever live it. Wealth, success, and fulfillment do not belong to those who chase noise, but to those who build quietly, with patience, with rhythm and with peace that no storm can shake. Look back for a moment and notice the ledger of your life. Not the flashy entries everyone sees, but the small debits and credits that accumulated when no one was watching. Each night you chose the quiet habit over the quick pleasure. Each morning you showed up when your body begged for rest. Each time you said later to impulse and now to practice. You were making deposits in a future that would one day cash those notes. At first the balance seems negligible. The math feels cruelly slow. But over seasons, the arithmetic of patience reveals itself. What once looked like sacrifice transforms into a currency of freedom. The comfort you chased earlier taught you an invaluable lesson, that ease is often a cunning form of bondage, and resistance to it is the first true step toward liberty. The voice that once argued for comfort begins, after enough repetitions, to soften and then to change its tune. Where resistance once rose, a clamor of excuses and rationalizations, there appears instead a quiet gratitude. You find yourself thanking the mornings you rose early, the nights you worked while others partied, the frugal choices that felt stingy at the time. That gratitude is not for suffering but for growth. It is an appreciation for the person those hardships invited you to become. In other words, the sting of discipline matures into the warmth of perspective, and what was once endured is now recognized as the architecture of your capacity. When discipline stops feeling like a list of prohibitions, something remarkable happens. It becomes an identity. It changes from I must into I am. Your decisions stop being isolated acts and begin to resemble a pattern, a way of moving through the world. You notice it in the small things, the steadiness of your attention in conversation, the clarity with which you prioritize your time, the way your finances obey a plan instead of reacting to impulse. This identity is not brittle. It is generous. It allows you to love with steadiness rather than drama, to give with intention rather than guilt, and to hold goals as a steady horizon instead of urgent demands. As this identity deepens, your outer world begins to mirror the inner work. The accounts that once caused anxiety now show predictable growth. The body that once turned to quick fixes now responds to sustained care. Even relationships change, because presence replaces the erratic availability that once characterized you. This is not coincidence but correspondence. What you cultivate inside radiates outward in choices, vocabulary, and temperament. Where before you fragmented your attention across many shallow pleasures, now your attention gathers, and with it comes a refinement in how you spend time, money, and love. A delightful clarity replaces the noise that used to clutter your mind. Simplicity sneaks in like a guest you didn't realize you were missing. It sits quietly at your table and makes everything taste better. Decisions that once felt like dilemmas now require only a glance. Does this align with the person I want to be? If yes, proceed. If no, decline. That kind of filter is not moralistic. It is practical. It saves energy, protects focus, and creates space for the few things that matter deeply to flourish. What used to seem like deprivation now appears as elegant subtraction, less to carry, more to cherish. The word discipline itself undergoes a subtle transformation. Where it once clanged with images of restriction and stern willpower, it begins to glow with a different light: devotion. Devotion to craft, to family, to future, to health. Devotion implies affection. It implies that the practices you keep are not chores, but vows you keep to someone you respect, yourself. When discipline becomes devotion, the tone of your life shifts from the mechanical to the sacred. Daily practices are no longer chores on a checklist. They are rituals that consecrate time and give shape to your days. And in that consecration, something rare and quiet takes root. Fulfillment that external noise cannot touch. This is not the loud thrill of novelty or the shallow high of consumption. It is the low resonant hum of a life assembled with care. It feels like waking early and having time to think. Like a bank account that sleeps peacefully through market storms. Like relationships that can survive disagreement, because they are built on consistency rather than performance. This fulfillment is paradoxically both humble and sovereign. Humble because it celebrates small fidelity. Sovereign because it can neither be bought nor taken away. It is the proof that what you built inwardly has become your external inheritance. So if you find yourself weary, wondering whether the small acts still matter, remember this. Every no you gave to distraction was a yes to a different future. Every minute you spent on steady practice planted a root that will one day hold you up in storms. Discipline, once feared as a limitation, becomes the quiet engine of a life that does not need to shout to be significant. In the end, the bravest thing you can do for your future is to persist in the small, invisible practices today, because those are the ones that, in time, give you a freedom no noise can ever purchase. Remember those early days, the ones filled with hesitation, with doubt, with the kind of fatigue that made every small step feel monumental. You remember the mornings you forced yourself out of bed before dawn, the evenings you stayed in when friends went out, the decisions that felt like denial rather than devotion. Back then, consistency felt like sacrifice. Each act of effort carried the sting of something you believed you were giving up. Pleasure, rest, spontaneity, ease. And in those moments, comfort seemed kinder. It whispered, "You deserve a break. You've done enough. Why keep pushing?" It promised relief, but only for a moment. Then came the guilt, the quiet awareness that comfort had borrowed peace it couldn't afford to repay. Now, looking back, something remarkable has changed. The very routines that once felt heavy now feel sacred. What was once a struggle to maintain has become a rhythm that sustains you. You no longer force yourself to do what matters. You feel drawn to it. Each disciplined act is no longer a burden to bear, but a form of love. Love for your future self, for your peace, for your integrity. It's as if the same discipline that once demanded your energy now gives it back to you tenfold. The habits that began as obligations have transformed into expressions of respect for the life you're building. You no longer view effort as something to survive, but as something that enriches your existence. Discipline has turned from an external rule into an internal compass. The pain you once felt along the way, the frustration, the self-doubt, the endless tug-of-war between progress and procrastination, wasn't punishment. It was a signal, a conversation between who you were and who you were becoming. Pain, you realize, was simply your old self resisting evolution. Every time you felt discomfort in growth, it was your identity being stretched, reshaped, refined. Growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through tension. And the discomfort that once made you question your path now feels like a necessary toll on the road to something greater. It was never meant to break you. It was meant to reveal your strength. Acceptance arrives quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. You begin to understand that discipline never really took anything from you. It only stripped away what was holding you back. It revealed who you truly were beneath the noise, beneath the distractions, beneath the short-term comforts that clouded your clarity. The more you gave to discipline, the more it gave back. Focus, peace, confidence, stability. It became less about controlling your behavior and more about aligning your life with your deeper values. You see now that the process wasn't about perfection. It was about integrity. Every small commitment kept was a declaration. I can trust myself. And that kind of trust is the foundation of freedom. Somewhere along this journey, your definition of wealth began to change. At first, it was about accumulation, more money, more options, more comfort. But over time, you began to see that true wealth was never the end goal. It was simply the reflection of a disciplined mind, a mind that could delay gratification, stay patient through uncertainty, and act with clarity instead of impulse. Financial stability became a byproduct of personal stability. The more orderly your inner world became, the more prosperous your outer world appeared. And it wasn't luck or timing. It was the compound effect of quiet consistency, of showing up for yourself day after day, even when no one else noticed. You start to understand that true success isn't about arriving somewhere new. It's about becoming someone real. It's not about escaping who you were, but uncovering the strength that was always inside you, waiting to be disciplined into form. The external rewards, the career growth, the financial gains, the recognition, these are all fine and good. But the real victory lies in how you carry yourself through the ordinary days. When no one is watching, when there's no applause or validation, that's where the essence of success is found. Success becomes a mirror, not reflecting what the world thinks of you, but what you know about yourself. And what you now know is that you're capable of more peace, more patience, and more purpose than you ever imagined. Restlessness, once your constant companion, begins to fade. In its place grows something richer, quieter, gratitude. Gratitude for the process, for the lessons, for the moments when you almost gave up but didn't. You realize that the destination never mattered as much as the direction, and that each disciplined choice was a vote for the kind of life you wanted to live. Gratitude changes everything. It softens ambition without killing it. It allows you to chase growth without despising the present. It reminds you that the work was never meant to make you perfect. It was meant to make you whole. And in that wholeness you find peace. Not the fleeting peace that comes from things going your way, but the deeper kind that exists regardless of circumstance. The peace of knowing you have built a foundation solid enough to stand on, a mind disciplined enough to weather storms, and a heart humble enough to keep learning. You see now that every repetition, every refusal to quit, every quiet act of consistency was preparing you for this. Not the applause, not the results, but the calm that comes from alignment. So you take a breath and smile, not out of pride, but understanding. The early struggle was never wasted. The sacrifices were never losses. They were the tuition you paid for self-respect, for clarity, for freedom. Discipline didn't confine your life. It refined it. It didn't harden you. It softened you in the right ways. It taught you to stay when things got hard, to wait when the world rushed, and to believe when results lagged behind effort. Now, as you stand in the quiet space between who you were and who you've become, you can finally see the truth. Discipline was never a cage. It was the key, and all along it was unlocking you. Gratitude deepens over time, not in bursts of emotion, but in the quiet recognition of how far you've come. You begin to look back on those early mornings, when the alarm rang before dawn and you questioned whether it was worth it. You remember the evenings when you stayed the extra hour, not because you wanted to, but because you refused to betray your own promise. Those small acts of consistency that once felt insignificant now shine like milestones. Each early rise, each sacrifice of comfort, each moment of self-restraint was a thread in the fabric of your transformation. You realize now that the victories no one saw were the ones that shaped you the most. The world may never applaud the mornings you chose discipline over distraction, but your life, your peace, your results, your quiet confidence, they all stand as proof that those invisible moments mattered. Gratitude shifts from something you practice to something you live. It's no longer a list of things you're thankful for, but a lens through which you see the world. You begin to thank the process, not just the rewards. You thank the days that tested your patience, the setbacks that refined your resilience, the uncertainty that forced you to build faith in something steadier than circumstance. You start to sense that life, in its own quiet wisdom, rewards those who align with its natural rhythm. The pace of nature is slow, deliberate, patient, and when you move with it, peace follows. You see it in the seasons, in the markets, in the growth of a tree or the compounding of wealth. Everything meaningful unfolds in time. Discipline is simply the courage to trust that pace, even when your emotions want to sprint ahead. You used to think perfection was the goal, that you had to get everything right, every day, without falter. But life never asked for perfection. It asked for presence. It asked that you show up, even on the days you didn't feel inspired, even when your progress seemed invisible. Perfection is brittle. Presence is resilient. One cracks under pressure. The other bends and returns to form. You've learned that being present with your effort, your emotions, your goals is enough to keep you moving forward. The irony is that the more you accept your imperfections, the more consistent you become. You stop swinging between extremes of guilt and pride and find a steadier rhythm, one where progress feels natural rather than forced. Even on imperfect days, discipline remains a loyal companion. It doesn't scold you for missing a step. It simply waits for you to return. There's a tenderness to it, a quiet invitation that says, "Come back home." You might fall behind, you might get distracted, you might even lose your way for a while. But discipline is patient. It's not punishment. It's alignment. Like gravity, it's always there, gently pulling you back to your center. The moment you choose to begin again, it meets you halfway. And each time you return to your practice, your routine, your purpose, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. You learn that consistency isn't about never falling. It's about always rising. There's a peace that comes with knowing you can trust yourself, not because you've never failed, but because you've proven that failure doesn't end you. Your word begins to mean something sacred. When you say you'll do something, you follow through, not because the world is watching, but because you are. There's a rare kind of freedom in that integrity. You no longer need external accountability, because your own conscience has become your compass. The noise of comparison fades. The need for validation quiets. You stop chasing and start embodying. Trust in yourself becomes the most valuable currency you possess, the kind that can't be stolen, inflated, or lost in a market crash. It's wealth of the deepest kind, self-respect. And as this trust deepens, something beautiful happens within the heart. The sharp edges of ambition begin to soften. Where once there was fire, the burning need to prove, to acquire, to achieve, there is now a steady glow. It's not that you lose your drive, it's that you learn to direct it with grace. You no longer chase outcomes with desperation. You create with devotion. Your ambition becomes quieter, wiser, more purposeful. You stop measuring your worth by your output and start measuring it by your peace. You understand that true achievement isn't about having everything, but about needing less and being more. In this space, gratitude becomes the foundation, not the afterthought. You wake each day with a subtle awareness, a recognition that the life you're living now was once something you only hoped for. The peace you feel wasn't handed to you. It was earned through the countless moments you stayed true to what mattered most. You find yourself no longer rushing toward the next milestone, but savoring the current step. The stillness that once felt uncomfortable now feels like home. You begin to see that serenity was never the absence of effort, but the result of effort aligned with purpose. From that glow, that gentle, unhurried glow of inner steadiness, a new kind of serenity is born. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply exists, quietly, like a candle that refuses to go out no matter how strong the wind. This serenity is the reward of discipline, not the fleeting thrill of success, but the lasting calm of self-mastery. It's knowing that you are no longer at war with yourself. Your thoughts, your actions, your values, they've come into harmony. You no longer live in reaction to life. You live in rhythm with it. And perhaps the greatest realization of all is this: discipline was never about control. It was always about connection, to your purpose, your potential, your peace. The early mornings, the delayed gratifications, the repeated efforts were never about restriction. They were about liberation. They taught you how to live freely within structure, how to find joy in restraint, how to experience abundance not through excess, but through appreciation. You've discovered that freedom and discipline are not opposites. They are partners, dancing in rhythm through every chapter of a meaningful life. So now, as you sit in the stillness of your own growth, you feel no rush to move. You've learned to breathe between accomplishments, to rest within effort, to find beauty in the ordinary. Gratitude fills the spaces where impatience used to live. And you realize, this was never just about building wealth, success, or even discipline. It was about learning to be at peace with who you are becoming. That peace, gentle, steady, and whole, is the truest fortune of all. Discipline is the invisible architecture of every lasting success. It does not arrive wrapped in spectacle or put on a show. It is the scaffolding built quietly, bolt by bolt, in the background of ordinary days. When you study lives that withstand storms, businesses that survive recessions, marriages that grow old with grace, bodies that age well, you won't find a single moment of miraculous luck. You'll find rhythms, commitments, and small unglamorous choices repeated until they harden into habits and habits into character. The visible outcome is simply the public face of a private architecture that was laid down without fanfare. Consider how discipline turns chaos into clarity. When life feels scattered, calendars overbooked, attention splintered, priorities blurred, discipline offers a frame that organizes both time and intention. It's the act of deciding today what your future will thank you for. saving a portion of income, preserving an hour for deep work, saying no to an invitation that derails your week. These acts clarify what matters by default, because when you commit to them, less essential voices fall away. Clarity isn't a gift of luck. It's the natural byproduct of structure. If discipline turns effort into evidence, it does so through the quiet arithmetic of repetition. A single attempt rarely proves anything. It is the 1,000th attempt that becomes proof. As James Clear has said, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, and that compound interest shows up as visible skill, reliable savings, or a reputation for follow-through. Over time, the accumulation of small disciplined choices writes a ledger of credibility you can point to when doubt arrives. You begin to trust the contour of your life because it is backed by what you consistently do, not merely by what you hope to do. Dreams become inevitable not because fate conspired, but because discipline turns intention into trajectory. There is a difference between wishing and wiring. Wishing is transient, wiring endures. When you wire your days with practice, your environment and your options rearrange until the dream is no longer an exception, but the most natural outcome of your pattern. This is the slow alchemy at work. The invisible becomes visible precisely because the work never stopped. Inevitability is not arrogance. It is the humility of understanding that small acts piled up over time yield outsized consequences. What once looked like sacrifice reveals itself as the seed of sovereignty. Early on, the word sacrifice carries a sting. You give something up and feel the loss. But when those sacrifices compound, they become the capital that buys freedom later. The nights you said no to short-term pleasures paid dividends in mornings of quiet confidence. The months you chose practice over performance built an interior bank of competence that no external test could liquidate. Sovereignty is the ownership you earn when you have paid your dues in discipline rather than borrowed your life on credit. True wealth, then, is not counted in bank statements alone, but in moments of self-respect earned through action. Money can be lost or gained, accounts can fluctuate, but the internal currency of trusting yourself deepens and hardens with every promise kept. There is a dignity that lives in the person who, in the absence of applause, still keeps their word. That dignity multiplies into calmer decisions, fewer reactive choices, and a reserve of credibility that yields opportunities others misread as luck. Wealth of character underpins every sustainable form of wealth that follows. The world will always celebrate speed and spectacle because those are easier to compress into headlines and stories. Yet life rewards endurance, the slow, steady kind that resists the seduction of shortcuts. Endurance is not dramatic. It is stubborn. It is the person who returns to the page, to the gym, to the spreadsheet day after day, long after enthusiasm has left the room. Over time, endurance outperforms spikes of brilliance precisely because it is reliable when circumstances change. The disciplined do not chase freedom as a destination they will finally arrive at. They become freedom by embodying it. There is a paradox here that is worth holding close. Freedom that is purchased from impulse is fleeting, while freedom that is earned through repeated restraint is permanent. When your choices are governed by values rather than moods, you are no longer subject to the tyranny of your whims. Your life becomes a series of deliberate openings rather than an endless flight from discomfort. And finally, understand that freedom belongs only to those strong enough to earn it daily. It is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice. Sovereignty must be maintained the same way health must be tended. This is the good news. The practice is simple to describe and difficult to execute, and it rewards persistence more than genius. If you can learn to value the long ledger over the instant scoreboard, if you can treat every small no as a deposit into your future capacity, then you are no longer a passenger in your life, but its architect. That is the core promise of discipline, not the narrow triumphs of the moment, but the lasting peace of a life deliberately built. Thank you for walking this path of quiet strength and reflection. In a world that glorifies speed, noise, and instant results, you've chosen the slower, subtler road, the one paved with intention, patience, and quiet repetition. It's not always an easy path to walk. It asks you to delay gratification when others celebrate shortcuts, to keep faith when progress hides behind monotony, and to trust that the unseen work you do today will bloom in ways you can't yet measure. But that is precisely what makes this journey sacred. It is invisible to the world, but visible to your soul. The truth is, discipline has never been about punishment. It's about creation. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, every morning you rise before the world does, every dollar you save instead of spend, you are shaping something larger than a result. You are shaping a reality. You are creating the architecture of your own freedom. Discipline builds the invisible scaffolding that supports the life you've always imagined. It turns intentions into integrity and habits into harmony. Each act of consistency, no matter how small, is a stroke of craftsmanship on the masterpiece of your becoming. If you ever doubt the value of the small things, look to nature for reassurance. A single seed holds within it the potential of an entire forest, yet its growth is invisible for weeks, even months. It burrows quietly, unseen, before it ever dares to rise toward the light. The same is true for you. Your roots, the efforts, sacrifices, and choices no one sees, are the foundation of everything lasting. While others chase the quick bloom of temporary success, you are cultivating something deeper, something that will endure long after trends fade and noise passes. The world might not notice your roots growing, but one day it will stand in awe of your branches. There's a quiet dignity that comes from knowing you've stayed true to yourself in the dark. When no one was watching, you showed up. When motivation ran dry, you chose movement over mood. When doubt whispered that you were wasting your time, you responded with action, not argument. That is the essence of self-respect, doing what aligns with your higher self, not your easier self. And as strange as it sounds, that self-respect becomes the truest form of wealth. Because when you trust yourself, when your word holds weight in your own heart, no amount of uncertainty can shake your foundation. We often chase wealth as if it exists somewhere outside of us, in accounts, accolades, or possessions. But real wealth is quieter, softer, more intimate. It's in waking up with peace because you know you've lived with purpose. It's in closing your day knowing you gave your best effort, even if no one applauded. It's in the calm confidence of a person who knows their value doesn't fluctuate with circumstance. The markets may rise and fall, opportunities may come and go, but the wealth of character, of discipline, focus, and inner steadiness is recession-proof. There is a rhythm to a disciplined life, and once you feel it, you never forget it. It's not a rhythm of rigidity, but of harmony, an elegant balance between doing and being. You begin to see how discipline doesn't restrict your freedom. It expands it. Because once you can trust yourself to follow through, you're free from the chains of guilt, procrastination, and self-doubt. You no longer live at the mercy of fleeting moods or external validation. You live from a deeper, quieter certainty, the kind that can't be faked or borrowed. And that certainty is power, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the steady kind that commands respect. It's the power of consistency, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you'll show up tomorrow just as you did today. It's the kind of strength that makes others wonder how you keep going, when in truth you've simply learned to make peace with the process. You understand now that greatness isn't built in moments of brilliance, but in the long, steady practice of showing up when no one's cheering. So as this chapter closes, take a moment to honor the road you've walked. Reflect on how far you've come, not in outcomes, but in the way you've grown. You've learned to see effort as love, patience as power, and consistency as a form of prayer. You've traded the fleeting thrill of comfort for the lasting peace of self-mastery. You've realized that the real reward of discipline isn't the wealth it builds, but the person it allows you to become. From this moment forward, let these words serve as gentle reminders. When the world rushes, slow down. When impatience stirs, breathe deeper. When doubt creeps in, return to the rhythm of your habits, those quiet anchors that tether you to your purpose. Keep tending to the unseen efforts, for they are not small things. They are the roots, the rhythm, and the reason you will endure when others fade. Remember, you are not merely managing your time or your money. You are shaping your legacy. Every act of discipline is a declaration of who you choose to be, not once but continually. It is a conversation between your present and your future, a promise whispered through action rather than words. That's the kind of wealth no one can measure. Yet everyone can feel when they meet you, the wealth of a person who has become whole through effort, patience, and self-respect. And perhaps that is the quiet miracle of it all, that the path to freedom isn't about having more but needing less. It's about standing tall in the quiet, knowing that you have done the work, and that the work has shaped you into someone you can finally be proud of. True wealth in the end is not what you hold, as it's who you are. So, as you return to your life beyond these words, carry this truth with you. Every moment of discipline is an act of creation, and every act of creation is a brushstroke on the canvas of your destiny. Keep tending to the roots, keep showing up in the small ways, and keep honoring the quiet strength that built everything you love. Because the truest form of wealth will always be this: becoming someone you deeply, sincerely, and unshakably respect.